Thanks a lot for the very nice introduction, David. I hope the fact that I don't care can be a good thing. I do care for this academy and for the things I research. So I would like to start with just expressing my gratitude for receiving this award. I can only second Colleen's words. Where is she? Over there from yesterday, that the academy has really become like a family to me. I reflected about it yesterday, and I thought, like, I would miss a big part of my life if I wouldn't be part of this community. So this really means a lot for me. I would also like to thank John Barry for nominating me, and I also congratulate the other award winners. And thank you for an amazing speech on aging among migrants. This is a very new topic to me, so super interesting. I was asked to give a presentation on my own work, but also on how I believe the field of intercultural relations should adapt in the future to be able to handle future challenges. It's a tough call. I don't know whether I have concrete answers to that, but I have a lot of questions that I'm going to share with you today. So let's see. I would like to start with this thought experiment. Just imagine that you would randomly pick two individuals from the country or city, or let's say neighborhood that you live in. What do you think would be the chance that the two would belong to different ethnic groups? Obviously, depending on where you live, this percentage is going to be different. But this metric, which is called the diversity index, is very valuable to understand how fast societies are changing across the world. So if we just take a look at the United States, here you can see that in 2010, a lot of states had a percentage over 50%. So you were most likely to actually pick people from two different groups. When we now fast forward just 10 years, 1 decade, you can see that this percentage has increased dramatically, right? Now you might, of course, oh, sorry, there we go. Yeah, and this development can be described as with a concept that is not that much used in psychology, but more in sociology, called superdiversity. Superdiversity is defined as a notion intended to underline a level and kind of complexity surpassing anything the country has previously experienced. Such a condition is distinguished by a dynamic interplay of variables among an increased number of new, small and scattered, multiple origin, transnationally connected, socioeconomically differentiated and legally stratified immigrants who have arrived over the last decade. Superdiversity has many faces, and that is one of them. For those of you who are from the East Coast, you might recognize that is actually the map of New York City. Each of these small points that have different colors represents 100 people from a certain ethnic group. And what you can see is that although you see some segregational patterns, you also see that some areas are super diverse. This is really a mix of a lot of different ethnic groups. You can see the same pattern in other cities such as Los Angeles. It still is a bit more segregated, but even there, some areas are really super diverse environments. Of course, you might counter now and say that, okay, you are giving these examples from the United States. The United States is a settler society. It has always been super diverse. That's not a surprise, right? But luckily, I come from a country that has been ethnically homogeneous for a long time, namely Norway. So let's take a look at the situation there. So I'm from the city of Oslo, and on this map you can see the percentage of people with a migration background in the different neighborhoods. Okay? Fast forward just 15 years later, you can see that the picture of the city has shifted dramatically. So there are a lot of areas in the city, especially in the east and the south, where migrants now make up more than 50% together. And that leads me to the first consequence of this superdiversity, namely the emergence of majority-minority societies. What does that mean? That means societies in which minority groups taken together numerically make up more people than the former ethnic majority group. And in many places of the world, this is already very present. So for instance, 109 counties in the United States, in these countries, the white population share fell below 50% within 2 decades. You can also observe this at the state level, at the city level, around the world, and obviously, especially in neighborhoods. So I think almost every city nowadays, at least in the Western Hemisphere, has the situation of a minority-majority society. This has consequences for how we study intercultural relations and specifically acculturation. And since I personally focus a lot on acculturation, I'm going to focus a bit on this right now. So the first question this urges is, how do we study acculturation towards multiple groups, towards multiple cultural spheres? We all know Barry's model, which honestly was a revolution at the time, right? It's a very powerful model. It really changed how we thought about things, especially maybe with its emphasis on acculturation being bidimensional, right? However, in reality, acculturation is multidimensional. If we just take the example of the United States and just use very broad clusters of cultures, obviously it's much more refined in reality. We can see that for different people, they're going to have very unique acculturation footprints in such a multidimensional space. And of course, it gets even much more complicated than that when we look at the domain level. So if we revisit the city of New York and just imagine a person called Yasmin. Now, Yasmin was born to a Syrian Arab mother, to a father of Iraqi Kurdish origin. She was born in LA. She grows up in a very mixed neighborhood where no ethnic group actually forms the majority. Her best friends are Mexican and Black American. Her favorite food is Asian. She speaks English, Arabic, and Sorani. Her religion is Christian. Her future partner might be Irish. Her humor, she might describe it as typical for New York, but she loves Bollywood entertainment. Another person might be Yahil. Yahil's mother is Eritrean, father Ethiopian. He was born in Tel Aviv. Now he lives in a neighborhood with a majority Asian population. His best friends are Asian and Ashkenazi Jewish. He loves kebab, that's his favorite food. His language that he speaks at home is Hebrew, Tigrinya, and English in the majority society. His religion is Jewish. His future partner is Asian. His humor, again, typically New York, and entertainment, he gets it from TikTok. And then finally, we can think about a person like Lisa, who would be described as a classic majority group member in our research. Her parents are European American. She was born in New York. However, she lives in a clearly majority Latin American neighborhood. So accordingly, her best friends are Latin American. Her favorite food is Latin American. She speaks English and Spanish. She is, however, an atheist, or she becomes an atheist over her lifetime. Her future partner is Latin American. Her humor is Latin American, and she loves Venezuelan soap operas. So my question is, how much of this diversity do we miss by using our classic bidimensional frameworks of acculturation? And the case of Lisa, who can be described as a former or current majority group member, raises the next question that I focus on in my own research. And that is the acculturation of majority group members. So we all know that acculturation is commonly defined as a two-way street of mutual accommodation. However, if we look at the literature, Almost all studies have looked at how minority group members change culturally due to intercultural contact. Now you might say to me, okay, wait a second, actually there's a lot of research focusing on the acculturation of majority groups. However, if you look at these studies, it's mostly about expectations that these majority group members have towards minority group members, or prejudice, or threat perceptions, but not about cultural change that they experience. So in a recent line of research, we started to focus on this area, and we define majority group acculturation as the cultural and psychological changes that current or former majority group members experience and the cultural styles they adopt as a result of prolonged contact with immigrants and other ethnic minority group members living in the same society. So very similar to how we define acculturation generally and how minority group acculturation has been understood. Importantly, we do not equate majority group acculturation with intercultural sensitivity. These things are likely related, but we are understanding majority group acculturation as the phenomena where majority groups adopt aspects of minority group cultures as part of their cultural standard default repertoire. Okay? So deep cultural change. However, we do not want to say that acculturation of majority group members is the same as the acculturation of minority group members. It obviously is not. Due to power differentials that Agnes also talked about, the experience of acculturation is much less stressful for most majority group members. And one issue that is important and that we haven't really focused on much so far, but I hope research will emerge on this topic, is the issue of cultural appropriation, right? When do we talk about real cultural adaptation versus kind of a stereotypical distortion of minority group cultures? And here, a recent review by Sagevka and colleagues that also focused on majority group acculturation emphasizes the need to understand what minority groups prefer that majority groups do, right? That might help us understand these boundaries. Now, how do we measure majority group acculturation? So far, we have used bidimensional measures. Obviously, these are not ideal. It's just a start because a majority group member is going to be exposed to a lot of different cultures. But we have, for instance, adopted IAIR. We have also established own scales. I'm just going to read 2 items so you understand approximately how we measure this. So, for instance, how important is it for you to maintain the mainstream American cultural way of living? Or how important is it for you to participate in the ethnic minority group members' cultural way of living? Okay, that's how we measure it at the moment. I think it can be refined a lot, it can be improved, but it's at least how we've started this type of investigation. And we have so far conducted a series of studies in several countries. And interestingly, we find only partial support for Barry's model. That is, I think my pointer doesn't work, but I will try to work you through this. So, as you can see in these bars, in almost all studies, we find that a portion of majority group members integrate. They prefer to maintain their heritage culture, but also adopt the culture that immigrants and minority group members have in society. At the same time, and maybe less surprising, we find, as indicated by the orange bars, that in most studies, a portion of participants rejects immigrants' cultures entirely. They don't want anything to do with that. We almost never find assimilation or marginalization. And in the light blue bars, you find a so-called diffuse cluster. And these are people that we don't know yet what they actually are doing. They can't be identified as belonging to one of these clusters clearly, and we still need in-depth investigations to understand what these people do. And I think often, when I think about Colleen's work, for instance, that these might be people who merge cultures, who create new cultures that are not anymore categorized as part of the majority or minority group. When we ask open-ended questions, we see that majority group members, this is a sample in Norway, they report cultural change due to immigrants and minority group members in a large array of cultural domains. And you can see the percentages are pretty marked. I don't think we had any participant who said there's no change in my society's culture. So that was pretty striking. We've also done some research on the predictors of majority group acculturation. That is, who are these people who see value in adopting minority or immigrant cultures. And what we find is that these individuals have a global identification, they are more ethno-relativist, they have more contact with immigrants, they are more positive towards them, they perceive immigration as an enrichment, and in terms of personality, they are more open and have more of a growth perspective. Vice versa, people who reject this culture are people with a strong national identification, who are ethnocentrists, who perceive immigration as a threat or perceive discriminated by immigrants and minority groups. Now, you might ask me, okay, this is all interesting and descriptive, but why does it matter? Why do we actually need to understand the high power groups' acculturation? And one reason for it is that it really matters for intergroup relations. So for instance, we find that majority group members who adopt immigrant culture, they are more positive towards immigrants generally. We find this in longitudinal research, namely showing that people who adopt immigrant cultures at one time point, they end up endorsing more positive and welcoming acculturation ideologies such as multiculturalism or polyculturalism at a later time point. So that is one reason why this is really important. We have developed a model to study these processes, which we published in a recent paper. And as some of you might know, we have a special issue announced at the moment in IAIR, where we really welcome qualitative, quantitative, and theoretical papers of all kinds. So if you think about maybe I have some research that might be relevant for this, but I'm not sure, please approach me and we can discuss it. So to summarize, increases in diversity or the resulting superdiversity really urges us to reconsider and reevaluate our models and theoretical frameworks. And the question is, of course, do we need new models? Can we adjust existing models? What is the best way forward? And I believe that we need to focus more on majority group members as recipients and immigrants and former minority group members as agents of cultural change. Because that's also really a switch in perspective and empowering the minority group members. And I believe that understanding this acculturation will help us foster more positive intercultural relations. So before I end, I would just like to thank my two advisors, David Declan Sam and John Dovidio, as well as John Barry and Katharina Leftinghausen for contributing to this line of research. And I thank you very much.